No one believed the Alpha King would dive into the Black Lake for the girl they had already condemned to disappear forever. By the time the first ripple spread across the surface of Asterfall, every wolf on the shore was certain the broken Omega's story had ended. None of them understood that the lake remembered truths people had spent generations trying to bury. Talia Price stood barefoot on the ancient stone platform, her wrists bound with braided silver cords that bit gently but relentlessly into her pale skin. Cold water washed over her ankles as the sinking post groaned beneath her weight, lowering inch by inch toward the waiting darkness. Around her, nearly 200 wolves from Tidefin Pack watched beneath a sky washed in moonlight, their lanterns casting trembling circles of gold across faces that held pity, fear, satisfaction, or carefully practiced indifference. Not one voice rose in protest. Not one hand reached toward her. 22 years of quiet endurance had led to this single impossible night. They had called her broken for so long that eventually the word had replaced her name. She was the Omega whose wolf had never completed its first shift, whose body answered every full moon with pain instead of power, whose silence had become easier for everyone than asking why. Children had learned to whisper about her before they even knew her face. Mothers pulled their daughters aside whenever she passed, warning them that misfortune could be contagious. The only person who had ever refused to look at her with disappointment had been her mother, Helena, whose gentle hands always rested over the small silver shell pendant around Talia's neck whenever fear threatened to swallow her whole. The tide never abandons what the moon has claimed, Helena would whisper with a smile that somehow carried both hope and sorrow. She had died when Talia was still a child, leaving behind nothing except that pendant and words no one could explain. Afterward, the house grew colder. Her father, Dorian Price, stopped speaking about Helena altogether, while her stepmother, Viola, carefully erased every trace that another woman had ever filled those rooms with kindness. Marissa Crowell, graceful, admired, and endlessly praised, became everything Tidefin wanted in a daughter, while Talia quietly became everything they wished they could forget. Earlier that evening, the fragile balance of her lonely life had shattered. Marissa had screamed that the sacred relic of Asterfall had vanished from the shrine. Elder Gideon Rusk had declared the ancient blood seal violated. Before Talia could understand why every eye had turned toward her, accusations were already spreading through the gathering like sparks racing across dry grass. She tried to explain that she had seen a dark figure leaving the shrine moments before the alarm, that she had noticed a strange mark hidden beneath Marissa's sleeve, that something about Elder Rusk's haste felt terribly wrong. No one listened. Brennan Holt, the beta who had once spoken of building a future beside her, stepped forward before the entire pack and chose reputation over loyalty. With carefully measured words, he withdrew every promise he had ever made, leaving Talia standing completely alone while the elders declared only one way remained to protect Tidefin from the curse. Now the Black Lake stretched beneath her like an endless mirror. Stories claimed an entire city slept below its surface, a place called Asterfall where old bells still rang beneath the water whenever innocence was sacrificed in the name of fear. As the platform settled lower, the cold climbed from her ankles to her knees. She searched the crowd one final time until she found Dorian standing beside Viola in his formal gray coat. Their eyes met for only an instant. She did not see hatred in her father's face. She saw terror. Then he looked away. Somehow that hurt even more. A distant sound broke the silence. Hooves struck the old stone road leading toward the lake. Every head turned as a procession of royal riders emerged through the mist, their midnight armor reflecting the moon like polished obsidian. At their center rode Alpha King Caspian Vale Mercer, his broad shoulders wrapped in a dark cloak, his silver-blue eyes sweeping across the ceremony with quiet authority. He had come to investigate strange disappearances near Asterfall, never expecting to find an execution disguised as tradition. The instant his gaze settled on the trembling Omega descending into the water, something invisible shifted between them. Talia could not explain why the air suddenly felt different, only that the pendant against her heart grew unexpectedly warm. Caspian's expression hardened. Elder Gideon Rusk saw it too. Panic flickered across the elder's face before he slammed his staff against the stone. "Complete the offering," he ordered. Now. The mechanism beneath the platform lurched violently. Ancient chains screamed against hidden gears. Black water surged upward around Talia's waist as the old stones beneath her cracked with a sound that echoed across the silent lake. Caspian was already moving before anyone else understood what was happening. The platform vanished beneath her feet, and for one suspended heartbeat, Talia felt nothing but air. Then the lake closed over her head with a force that drove the breath from her lungs. Sound disappeared. Lantern light broke apart above her in trembling gold ribbons, already too far away, already belonging to the world that had condemned her. The silver cord around her wrists dragged her downward, its weight guided by stones tied beneath the post, pulling her through cold black water toward the drowned rooftops of Asterfall. Panic clawed at her chest. She kicked once, uselessly, her dress tangling around her legs like a second current. Above the surface, shapes moved along the causeway, blurred and distant. No one dove in. No one even reached for her. Through the water, she thought she saw her father step forward, then stop as Viola gripped his arm. That small hesitation broke something in Talia more deeply than fear could. She had spent her whole life trying to earn one act of courage from him, one moment where he would choose his daughter over the safety of his own silence. Even now, when her life slipped below the lake, he only watched. The water burned her eyes, but she kept them open. A shadow passed overhead, large and sudden, disturbing the moonlit surface. For one wild second, she thought the city itself had moved. Then she saw him. Caspian Vale Mercer cut through the water like a dark blade, coat streaming behind him, silver blue eyes locked on her with a focus so fierce it felt like a command to stay alive. He had followed her. The Alpha King, ruler of every pack that had ever made Tidefen tremble, had thrown himself into the same death sentence meant for a broken Omega. Talia tried to reach him, but the cord jerked hard, dragging her lower. Her lungs spasmed. Tiny silver bubbles escaped her mouth. Caspian reached her wrists and seized the binding, his face tightening the moment his fingers touched the enchanted silver. It hurt him. She saw that clearly. Saw the flash of pain cross his pale features. Saw his jaw set as if pain was only another law he refused to obey. He pulled once. The cord held. Below them, the drowned streets opened like a graveyard of stone, rooftops slanting beneath curtains of weeds, windows staring upward with hollow patience. Something deep in the ruins answered the pendant at Talia's throat. Warmth spread from the little silver shell beneath her collar, faint at first, then sharp as sunrise beneath her skin. Caspian saw the glow. His eyes changed, not with fear, but recognition. Talia did not understand it. She only knew the lake had grown colder everywhere except where the pendant touched her heart. Above them, far beyond the broken waterline, Elder Gideon Rusk's voice carried in muffled echoes through the ritual stones, each word distorted but urgent. He was still chanting, still trying to finish whatever he had begun. The cord around Talia's wrists tightened, responding to him, pulling her toward a sunken archway carved with the same symbol hidden inside her mother's pendant. She shook her head, more instinct than thought. Not there. Something in her knew that if she crossed that threshold bound and breathless, she would not return as herself. Caspian wrapped one arm around her waist and planted his boots against a half-collapsed statue below. With his free hand, he tore at the cord again. This time, bloodless light flashed along the silver, racing up his arm. Talia felt his body jolt against hers, but he did not release her. His mouth shaped words she could not hear. Hold on. The simplicity of it pierced her. Not a promise of rescue, not a royal decree, not pity. Just two words spoken to a girl everyone had given up on. Talia closed her eyes and thought of her mother's hands, warm around the pendant, whispering that the tide did not abandon what the moon had claimed. The shell opened beneath her fingers. A pulse of pale blue light burst from her chest, spreading through the lake in a perfect circle. The silver cord loosened. The old archway below awakened, its carvings burning with moonlit fire. Caspian pulled her free just as the current reversed. Water rushed past them, not down but inward, dragging them through the glowing gate into the heart of Asterfall. The current dragged them through the glowing arch before either of them could fight it. For one terrifying instant, Talia believed she was still drowning. Then the crushing weight around her vanished. She collapsed onto cold stone, coughing until the water burned out of her lungs. while the silence that greeted her felt stranger than the lake itself. Caspian landed beside her only a heartbeat later, immediately reaching for her without hesitation, his hand steady against her shoulder until her breathing slowed. "Easy," he said quietly. "You are alive." She looked up at him, unable to answer. Above them, the lake still existed, but not where it should. 30 feet overhead, an endless sheet of black water stretched across the sky like a ceiling of living glass, drifting with slow currents and silver moonlight. Schools of pale fish swam where clouds should have been. The sight stole the last of the fear from her lungs and replaced it with wonder. They stood inside Asterfall. The drowned city had never been destroyed. It had simply been hidden beneath the water, preserved inside a world suspended between life and memory. Ancient streets extended into the distance beneath leaning towers wrapped in crystal-white coral instead of vines. Marble bridges arched over canals that no longer carried water, while rows of abandoned homes stood untouched by decay, their windows glowing faintly with soft blue light as though someone had only just extinguished the candles inside. Every few moments, a distant bell echoed somewhere beyond the empty streets. Lonely, patient, waiting. Talia instinctively pressed a hand against the silver shell pendant beneath her collar. It answered with a gentle warmth, as if recognizing the city before she ever could. Caspian noticed the glow immediately. His burned hand, marked by the enchanted silver cord he had torn away moments earlier, rested against his side, but he ignored the pain. Instead, he studied the ancient carvings lining the nearest building. Wolves knelt beside women wearing shell pendants identical to Talia's. Moonlight flowed around them like water, and beneath every carving was the same symbol hidden inside her pendant. "This place knows you," he murmured. Talia shook her head. "I have never been here." "Perhaps not," he replied. "But someone in your family has." His words settled heavily between them. Before Talia could respond, another sound drifted across the empty avenue. Footsteps. Slow, barely louder than falling rain. Caspian instinctively stepped half a pace in front of her, not shielding her completely, but placing himself where any danger would meet him first. It was such a quiet gesture that Talia doubted he even realized he had done it. A figure slowly emerged beneath a broken archway ahead. She looked like a young woman wrapped in flowing silver robes, yet her body shimmered with translucent light, her long hair floating as though she still stood beneath deep water. Her expression carried neither anger nor welcome, only immeasurable sadness. Her pale eyes settled first on Talia, then on the shell pendant glowing beneath her hand. "Another daughter has returned," she whispered. Her voice seemed less spoken than remembered, echoing through the empty streets as if the city itself carried it. Talia swallowed. "Who are you?" "One who waited too long." The woman's gaze drifted toward Caspian. "And one who watched kings forget." Caspian did not lower his eyes. "Tell us what this city truly is." The spirit lifted one translucent hand. Blue light spread silently across the stone beneath their feet, flowing through cracks in the ancient road until an intricate map appeared beneath them. Streets illuminated. Towers awakened. At the city's center stood a palace crowned beneath a silver moon symbol. Around it flickered faint images that appeared and vanished like reflections on water. Women carrying shell pendants. Wolves bowing their heads. Children laughing beside clear fountains that no longer existed. Then the vision changed. Water rushed through the streets. Bells rang wildly. Figures disappeared beneath rising tides, while others sealed enormous gates carved into the earth. The entire city willingly surrendered itself to the lake. Caspian's breathing slowed. "Asterfall was never destroyed," he said. "It chose to disappear." The spirit inclined her head, not to save itself. Her eyes returned to Talia with heartbreaking tenderness. To save those above from what slept below. The pendant against Talia's heart pulsed again. This time, something answered inside her. For the first time in 22 years, her wolf stirred without pain. Not fully awake, not yet free, but present, gentle, watching, waiting. Tears filled Talia's eyes before she understood why. She had spent her entire life believing she carried an empty silence where every other Omega carried a wolf. Now she realized the silence had never been emptiness. It had been a locked door. Above them, the vast ceiling of water suddenly trembled. Dark ripples spread across its surface like ink spilling through glass. The spirit looked upward, and genuine fear crossed her face for the first time. "The Elder has not stopped," she said. "He is trying to seal the city forever." Caspian followed her gaze, then looked back at Talia with quiet resolve. "Then we do not have much time." The spirit raised her hand once more, pointing toward the glowing palace at the heart of Asterfall. "Your answers are waiting there," she said. "Along with the truth both your bloodlines have feared for generations." The palace waited at the end of the avenue like a wound the city had never healed. Its marble doors stood half open, carved with wolves, moons, and waves that seemed to shift whenever Talia looked away. She walked beside Caspian in silence, her wet dress heavy against her legs, her mother's pendant pulsing in small, patient beats beneath her fingers. Every step drew a faint answer from the stones, thin lines of blue light waking under her feet, as if Asterfall recognized her before she recognized herself. That frightened her more than the darkness. She had spent 22 years being told she was incomplete, a mistake with no place in any pack, and now an entire drowned city was opening for her like a house that had been waiting. Caspian kept close, but not too close. He watched the windows, the arches, the hanging lake above them. Yet Talia felt his attention return to her whenever her breath caught. "You do not have to pretend you are not afraid," he said. The gentleness in his voice surprised her. "I am not pretending," she answered, then gave a small, broken laugh. "I am simply experienced at being afraid quietly." Something moved across his face, a shadow deeper than sympathy. "That is not strength anyone should have forced you to learn." The words reached places in her that apology never had. Before she could answer, the palace doors groaned inward without being touched. Inside, the grand hall was dry, untouched by weeds or silt, lit by a ceiling of suspended water that shimmered like midnight glass. Along the walls, hundreds of names were carved into silver plaques, most worn beyond reading. At the far end stood a moonstone basin filled not with water, but with moving light. The spirit from the avenue appeared beside it, her pale form flickering. "Only blood remembers what fear erased," she said. Caspian's posture hardened. "Speak plainly." The spirit lifted her hand, and the basin brightened. Images rose within it. A young woman with Talia's ash-brown hair placing a silver shell pendant into the hands of a child. Royal guards wearing an older version of Caspian's crest. Elders binding women at the flooded altar while kings looked away. Talia's stomach twisted. "My mother," she whispered. The image shifted. Talia saw her mother older, frightened but resolute, standing before this same basin. Beside her was Elder Gideon Rusk, younger than, his face smooth with false concern. He held a knife of black glass and a treaty stamped with the royal seal. "No," Caspian said, very quietly. "Not denial. Recognition." The spirit looked at him with sorrow. "Your uncle's council made the pact. Your throne inherited it." Talia turned to him, and for the first time, the space between them felt dangerous. "What pact?" Caspian did not look away from the basin. "Asterfall was sealed generations ago to contain a shadow curse tied to my bloodline. I was told the seal was maintained by volunteers from the old healer families." The basin darkened. The images showed women dragged to the lake under moonless skies, their pendants taken, their names removed from pack records. Not volunteers. Offerings. Talia's hand flew to her mouth. The hall seemed to tilt beneath her. Her mother had not vanished from illness, as Viola had always claimed. She had come here. She had closed something. She had left the pendant behind because she knew one day her daughter would be hunted for the same reason. Caspian stepped toward Talia, then stopped when she stepped back. The pain in his eyes was real, but so was the truth between them. "I did not know," he said. "But my ignorance does not make it clean." That sentence changed him in her mind. Not innocent. Not enemy. Something harder to understand. A king willing to stand inside the shame of his own crown. The basin flared again, and this time Talia saw the present, Rusk above the lake, Marissa beside him with her sleeve rolled back, revealing the same hidden mark Talia had seen near the shrine. Viola held the stolen relic against the ritual stone while Brennan kept the crowd away. Dorian stood frozen behind them, his face gray with horror too late to matter. Rusk's chant shook the palace walls. The spirit's voice sharpened. "They do not mean to keep the city sealed. They mean to open it and place the blame on the broken girl." The ceiling of water cracked with silver lines. Caspian seized Talia's hand as the hall trembled, but this time she did not pull away. The pendant opened against her chest, revealing a tiny pearl etched with the symbol of Asterfall. In its glow, her wolf stirred again, clear and awake. The first turn had come not from rescue, but from truth. Talia Price had not been thrown away because she was broken. She had been chosen because someone feared what would happen when she remembered she was not. The pearl inside the pendant did not simply glow, it listened. Talia felt it turn warm against her skin, answering the awakened lines beneath the palace floor, answering the frightened pulse inside her own chest. The hall trembled harder. Above them, the ceiling of suspended lake water split into thin silver fractures, each one spreading with a sound like ice under weight. Caspian kept hold of her hand, steady but not possessive, his burned palm rough against her damp fingers. "There will be another way," he said, though his eyes were already searching the room like a man who knew kings survived by recognizing hard truths before they finished speaking. The spirit's sorrowful gaze rested on Talia. "There was another way once. Your mother used it to delay the opening. She gave her life to keep the shadow beneath the city asleep." Talia's breath caught, not because she had not feared it, but because hearing it aloud made every lie of her childhood collapse at once. No fever, no quiet death, no shame. Her mother had stood here, where Talia stood now, and chosen a daughter's future over her own. The ache that followed was too large for tears. It filled her ribs, her throat, the hollow places where she had stored years of believing she had been abandoned. Caspian bowed his head, and when he spoke, his voice had lost its royal distance. "I am sorry." Talia looked at him. "Sorry will not raise her." "No," he said, "but truth may keep them from burying you beside her." The floor opened beneath the moonstone basin, revealing 7 shallow steps leading down into a chamber of pale blue fire. At its center stood a stone cradle holding an empty shell-shaped hollow, exactly the size of Talia's pearl. The spirit's form flickered as Rusk's chant shook the city from above. "If the air of the Moontide Healers places the heart pearl there, the gate will bind to her living blood. The city will no longer accept false offerings. No elder, no pack, no king will command Asterfall again." Talia heard what the spirit did not say. "And me?" The silence answered first. Then the spirit said, "You will be tied to the city until the curse is faced. You may leave, but you will never again be only yourself." Caspian's grip tightened for 1 second before he forced his hand to loosen. "No, she has already been used by enough people." The protectiveness in his voice should have comforted her. Instead, it sharpened the choice. For the first time, someone powerful wanted to stop the world from taking from her, yet stopping it now meant letting Rusk finish what he had begun. Above the lake, Viola, Marissa, Brennan, and every coward who had hidden behind law would survive by naming her guilty. More girls would be led to the water. More mothers would disappear into polite lies. Talia descended the first step. Caspian moved with her. "Talia." Her name in his voice was not a command. It was a plea he had too much discipline to make. She turned back, seeing not the Alpha King, not the cold ruler from whispered stories, but a man trapped inside a legacy built before he was born and brave enough to hate it. "All my life," she said softly, "they told me I was empty because my wolf would not come when they demanded. Maybe she was not broken. Maybe she was waiting until I had something worth protecting." His face tightened with emotion he did not try to hide. "If you do this, I stand with you." "Not in front of me," she said. "Beside me." A faint, startled warmth crossed his eyes. "Beside you." Together, they reached the cradle. Talia opened the pendant fully and lifted the pearl free. The moment it left the shell, her wolf rose inside her, no longer a fragment of pain, but a silver-white presence pressed gently against her soul. Talia almost sobbed from the relief of it. She had never been alone in her own body. She had only been locked away from herself. She placed the pearl into the hollow. Light burst upward through the palace, through the drowned streets, through the lake above, turning every drop of black water blue. Somewhere far overhead, the ritual chant broke. The city answered Talia with the sound of 1,000 hidden bells, and the bond between her blood and Asterfall sealed with a quiet finality that felt like a door closing behind her. There would be no returning to the girl who begged to be believed. From this breath forward, Tidefin would have to face the woman it failed to drown. The blue light did not fade after the city accepted her. It settled into Talia's bones like a second heartbeat, quiet, steady, impossible to deny. The palace walls opened around her in layers of memory, not pictures this time, but feelings so vivid they nearly took her breath. Her mother's fear, her mother's love, the taste of salt air on the night she chose to seal Asterfall, the weight of a baby girl kissed one final time before dawn. Talia pressed a hand to the cradle, trembling, while Caspian stood beside her with his shoulder close enough to offer strength and far enough to let her stand on her own. The spirit watched them from the steps, her face less hollow now, as if Talia's choice had given some small piece of the city back to itself. Your mother's name was Helena Price, the spirit said. But before Tidefin claimed her, she was Helena Voss, last sworn keeper of the Moontide Healers. Talia closed her eyes. Voss, a name no one had ever spoken in her father's house. Why hide that from me? Because the healers were not weak. Caspian answered softly, piecing the truth together with visible pain. They were the only bloodline that could refuse a king. The spirit's gaze shifted to him, and the only bloodline that could save one. The floor beneath the cradle brightened, revealing an older carving. Two wolves facing each other across a moonlit tide, one crowned in shadow, the other marked with a shell. Caspian went still. Talia saw the change in him, the careful guard falling over his face. Tell her, the spirit said. For a moment, he looked like he would rather face the collapsing lake than speak. Then he drew a slow breath. The shadow curse is not only in the city. It is in my blood. Every ruler of my line carries it. Some controlled it. Some were consumed by it. My father became cruel before I challenged him. I thought power made him that way. His voice lowered. Now I wonder how much of him was still his own. Talia remembered the stories whispered about Caspian, the cold king, the dangerous king, the man no lie survived. She had feared him before she knew him. Now she saw something worse than cruelty in him. She saw a man who had spent years mastering himself because he was terrified of becoming what he overthrew. That is why Rusk wanted the city opened, she said. Not just for power. For leverage, Caspian said. If he controls Asterfall, he controls the curse. If he controls the curse, he controls the throne. The spirit lifted her hand, and another image rose from the floor. Elder Gideon Rusk kneeling years ago before Viola Price, placing the black glass knife into her palm while Marissa, still a child, watched from behind a door. Viola's face was younger, but her ambition was already old. Beside them stood Dorian Price, pale and shaking, signing a pack record that erased Helena Voss from Tidefin history and renamed her only as his obedient Omega wife. Talia's throat tightened. My father knew. The words came out small, but they changed the air. Caspian looked at her with the kind of silence that did not excuse the wound. The spirit's voice softened. He knew enough to fear the truth, not enough to protect it. That mercy hurt more than accusation. Talia wanted anger to make it clean, but grief rose first. Her father had not been a monster standing over her with a knife. He had been a coward standing one step away, letting others cut her life into pieces because obedience felt safer than love. Above them, a violent tremor ran through the city. Dust fell from the palace arch. The suspended lake's ceiling darkened at the edges, turning from blue to bruised violet. The spirit looked upward. Rusk has changed the ritual. He cannot command the city now, so he will break the surface seal and let the shadow climb through Tidefin. Caspian's eyes sharpened. How long? Minutes. Talia felt her wolf press forward, silver and frightened, but no longer silent. Then we go back. Caspian turned to her. If we return before you understand the bond, Rusk will use the crowd against you. Fear is his weapon. Then truth has to be mine. The answer surprised her with its steadiness. She touched the pendant shell, now empty but alive with warmth. I spent my life waiting for someone to prove I was not broken. Maybe I have to stop waiting. Caspian held out his burned hand. Not to lead, not to claim, to join. Then we returned together. The spirit stepped aside as the palace doors opened toward a rising column of blue fire. In its center, Talia saw the causeway above, the pack gathered in terror, and Marissa holding the stolen relic as if it had begun to burn her. The truth was ready to surface, but so was the curse beneath it. The column of blue fire carried them upward with such force that the palace beneath Asterfall disappeared in a heartbeat. The next instant, Talia stumbled onto the shattered causeway, dropping to one knee as dawn's first pale light met the storm still circling above the lake. Water poured from her clothes, but the city beneath the surface no longer felt like a prison. It felt awake. Around the shore, the Tidefin pack had fallen into stunned silence. They had watched a condemned Omega vanish beneath 30 feet of black water. Now she had returned beside the Alpha King himself. Caspian stepped forward before anyone else could speak, his burned hand still marked by the silver cord that had nearly claimed them both. He stood shoulder to shoulder with Talia, not ahead of her, not behind her. The choice was impossible to ignore. Every wolf present understood that the king had publicly placed himself beside the woman they had condemned. Elder Gideon Rusk recovered first, his face twisted with desperate fury as he slammed the black staff against the cracked ritual stone. "She belongs to the city now," he shouted. "If she remains among us, every pack in the north will fall." Fear rippled through the crowd exactly as he intended. Mothers pulled children closer. Warriors shifted uneasily. Even those beginning to doubt him hesitated before generations of superstition. Rusk smiled when he saw uncertainty returning. "Look at the lake," he cried. "Look at what she awakened." The water behind Talia began to rise, forming a slow wall of black glass. Shapes moved beneath its surface, enormous and indistinct, making frightened whispers spread through the gathering. Caspian drew a slow breath. "Stand behind me," he said quietly. Talia looked at him, then gently shook her head. "No," she answered. "We stand together." Something softened in his expression before he faced the crowd again. "No wolf here will lay another hand on her." Before another word could be spoken, Viola stepped toward the broken altar, clutching the stolen relic against her chest. "You are all blind," she cried. "Helena's daughter carries the same curse. We should have finished this years ago." Her voice cracked with panic rather than conviction. Marissa, standing only a few feet away, stared at the relic as though seeing it for the first time. The violet mark hidden beneath her sleeve spread higher across her arm, and she gasped in terror. "He lied," she whispered. "Elder Rusk said it would only frighten her. He said the city needed someone broken." The confession echoed across the causeway. Every face turned toward the elder. Brennan Holt took an unconscious step backward. Dorian Price closed his eyes as though every lie he had accepted had finally become too heavy to carry. Rusk's composure shattered. "Silence," he roared. He thrust the staff into the ritual stone one final time. The fractured relic burst apart in Viola's hands, releasing a torrent of violet smoke that rushed toward Caspian like a living storm. It struck him squarely in the chest. He staggered. His silver-blue eyes darkened almost instantly, shadows spreading beneath his skin as the ancient curse recognized the blood of the royal line. Every instinct in Talia screamed to run toward him, yet she saw something even more frightening. Caspian was fighting himself. His fists trembled violently at his sides as though every ounce of discipline he had built throughout his life was being tested in a single terrible moment. "Stay back," he managed through clenched teeth. "If it takes hold," he could not finish the sentence. The lake answered instead. Black waves surged against the shore. Above them, the sky darkened although the sun continued to rise. Rusk laughed, convinced victory had finally returned to him. "Your king carries the darkness," he shouted to the pack. The broken Omega merely awakened it. Fear began shifting once more toward Caspian. Talia saw exactly what Rusk wanted. If the crowd believed the king himself had become the curse, panic would finish what the ritual could not. Then, from somewhere deep beneath the lake, a single bell rang. Clear, calm, familiar. The empty shell pendant resting against Talia's heart grew warm, and for the first time her wolf did not merely stir. She stepped fully beside her, silver-white, luminous, not in physical form, but as a presence so gentle that every frantic beat of Talia's heart suddenly steadied. She understood then what the Moontide healers had protected through generations. Their gift had never been destroying darkness. It was refusing to surrender compassion to it. Talia walked straight toward Caspian while everyone else recoiled. She placed both hands against his chest, directly over the shadows spreading beneath his heart. His breathing was ragged. His eyes struggled to focus on hers. "Look at me," she whispered. "You crossed the lake because you believed I deserved to live before you knew who I was. Let me believe the same about you." For one endless heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Caspian lifted his gaze. The darkness still fought inside him, but he was no longer fighting it alone. Blue light flowed from Talia's hands, not like a weapon, but like dawn quietly entering a room after the longest night. It spread through Caspian, into the shattered ritual stone, and finally into the lake itself. The black wall of water dissolved into countless silver droplets that fell gently across the gathering like warm rain. Beneath the clear surface, the towers of Asterfall rose into view for every wolf to see. Not cursed ruins. A forgotten city waiting to be remembered. Elder Gideon Rusk dropped his staff as a crack split it from end to end. Captain Naomi Wren immediately seized him while royal guards surrounded Viola without resistance. No one moved to defend them. No one looked at Talia with fear anymore. They looked at her with the stunned realization that the woman they had called broken had just saved the king they had believed could save everyone else. The first sound after the bells faded was not triumph. It was the quiet, frightened breathing of a pack that had finally run out of lies. Talia lowered Caspian carefully onto the wet stone, one hand still pressed to his shoulder as the last violet threads withdrew from his eyes. He looked up at her, not ashamed of having fallen, not too proud to accept that she had held him through the worst of it. "I am here," he said, his voice rough but clear. Only then did she let herself breathe. Around them, royal guards moved with calm precision. Captain Naomi Wren bound Elder Gideon Rusk's hands in iron etched with royal seals, while two guards secured Viola Price before she could reach the broken relic. Brennan Holt stood motionless, stripped of certainty, watching power turn away from him for the first time in his life. Marissa remained on her knees, clutching her marked arm as if she could hide what the entire pack had seen. No one laughed. No one whispered broken. The word had drowned somewhere beneath the rising bells. Caspian pushed himself upright with effort, and when Talia reached to help him, he accepted her hand in front of everyone. That simple choice changed the air more than any decree. "By authority of the Northern Tide's dominion," he said, his voice carrying across the causeway. "Gideon Rusk is charged with unlawful ritual practice, conspiracy against the crown, and the murder of those offered to Asterfall under false law." Rusk lifted his chin, but fear had made him smaller. "You cannot prove generations of custom were crimes." Caspian's gaze turned cold. "Custom does not make cowardice holy." Then he looked to Naomi. "Search the shrine, the elder house, and every sealed record in Tidefen. No name erased from Asterfall will remain buried." Naomi bowed once. "Yes, your majesty." Viola's composure cracked then, not into remorse, but outrage. "She would have ruined us," she snapped, pointing at Talia. "Helena's blood was always dangerous. I protected this family." Dorian flinched at Helena's name. Talia felt the old wound open, but it did not control her now. She stepped forward, her empty shell pendant resting against her heart, and met Viola's eyes without lowering her own. "You protected your comfort," she said. "Not this family." The words were not shouted, yet they traveled through every stunned face around them. Marissa began to sob harder. "I did not know he meant to open the city," she said, looking not at Talia, but at the ground. "I only wanted them to stop choosing you even when they called you nothing." The confession was ugly in its smallness, and somehow sadder for it. Talia had imagined justice would feel like fire. Instead, it felt like standing in cold morning air, seeing how much damage frightened people could cause when they mistook envy for injury. Brennan finally found his voice. "Talia, I was misled." She turned to him, and he stopped. Perhaps he saw the girl who once waited for his approval was gone. Perhaps he understood too late that rejection had not freed him, it had revealed him. "You were willing," she said. "That was all." His face folded around the truth. Then Dorian Price took a step toward her, slower than a man approaching a throne, more broken than any apology could repair. "Talia," he whispered, "I signed because Rusk said your mother had doomed the pack. I thought silence would keep you safe." Her throat tightened. For years, she had wanted him to explain himself. Now the explanation felt like an empty bowl offered after starvation. "Safe?" she asked softly. Dorian's eyes filled. He had no answer large enough. Talia looked at the man who had given her his name, but not his courage, and something inside her loosened. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But the end of begging. "You will tell the royal court everything about Helena Voss," she said. "Every record. Every lie. Every person who knew. Dorian bowed his head. I will. Behind them, the lake shimmered blue, and the ghostly outline of Asterfall sank back beneath the surface, no longer hidden, only waiting. Caspian came to stand beside Talia, close enough that his presence steadied without overshadowing. The pack owes you more than belief, he said. It owes you witness. One by one, wolves lowered their heads, not to the Alpha King, but to her. Talia felt her wolf stir, calm and whole. Yet beneath that fragile peace, the pendant shell gave one final pulse, and from deep under the water came a single bell note, soft as a warning and tender as a promise. The sun rose slowly over tide fen, washing the lake in soft bands of gold and silver until the water no longer resembled the place where fear had ruled for generations. The shattered ritual stones remained where they had fallen, untouched, not as monuments to victory, but as quiet reminders of what happened when tradition forgot compassion. Along the causeway, the wolves of the pack gathered once more, though this time no one stood above another. There was no altar, no accusation, no condemned soul waiting for judgment. Only silence, and the fragile hope that truth might finally become stronger than habit. Royal guards carried sealed chests recovered from Elder Gideon Rusk's hidden chambers, each filled with forgotten records, faded letters, and the names of Moontide healers deliberately erased from history. Captain Naomi Wren placed the oldest ledger into Talia's hands before anyone else could touch it. These were never the crowns to keep, she said. They belonged to the families who lost them. Talia opened the weathered pages with trembling fingers. Near the center she found the name she had searched for her entire life. Helena Voss Price. Moontide Healer. Guardian of Asterfall. Beneath the name was a final entry written in Helena's own hand only hours before she sealed the city. If my daughter ever stands where I once stood, tell her I never left because she was unworthy. I left because she was worth every tomorrow I could not live to see. The words blurred through tears she no longer tried to hide. For years she had carried the quiet ache of believing she had been abandoned. In a single sentence, her mother returned everything that fear had stolen. Talia closed the book against her heart and looked toward the lake. The morning breeze brushed gently across her face, warm and familiar, carrying the faint scent of rain and wildflowers that Helena had always loved. She smiled through her tears, not because grief had disappeared, but because it no longer stood alone. Dorian Price approached slowly, stopping several feet away as though he understood that love could never be demanded after trust had been broken. His shoulders seemed smaller than they had the night before. I spent years believing silence protected the people I loved, he said quietly. It only protected the people who frightened me. He lowered himself to one knee, not before a queen or a king, but before his daughter. I cannot ask you to forgive me. I can only promise that every lie I helped preserve will end with me. Talia looked at the father she had spent most of her life trying to earn. She realized, with surprising peace, that she no longer needed his approval to know her own worth. She stepped forward and gently asked him to rise. Tell my mother's story, she said. Tell it until no child grows up believing courage looks like silence. Dorian nodded, tears shining openly now. I will. Nearby, Viola was led away beneath royal escort without resistance, stripped not only of her influence, but of the lies she had hidden behind. Brennan Holt accepted judgment with lowered eyes, finally understanding that the moment he chose comfort over character had cost him far more than a future marriage. Marissa paused before climbing into the waiting carriage. She faced Talia one final time, her voice barely above a whisper. Your mother loved me when she did not have to. I answered kindness with envy. Talia held her gaze without bitterness. Then spend the rest of your life becoming the woman she believed you could be. Marissa closed her eyes, overcome not by punishment, but by the weight of grace she knew she had never deserved. When the prisoners departed, Caspian walked quietly toward the edge of the lake, where Talia stood alone. Neither spoke for several moments. Beneath the clear water, the graceful towers of Asterfall rested peacefully in the morning light, no longer hidden by darkness, no longer feared by those above. Caspian removed the heavy cloak from his own shoulders and gently settled it around hers against the cool breeze. The simple gesture carried more tenderness than any grand declaration. You are still cold, he said softly. Talia smiled. Not the way I was before. He looked at the faint silver marks that remained across her wrists, then at the matching scars left upon his own burned hand. Some scars should never disappear, he said. They remind us who chose courage when fear would have been easier. Slowly, he offered her his hand once more. When I dove into the lake, I thought I was trying to save one innocent life. I did not know that I would find the woman who would remind an entire kingdom what strength truly looks like. I cannot promise you a life without burdens. My crown still carries responsibilities, and your bond with Asterfall will always be part of who you are. But if you will allow me, I would like to carry those burdens beside you, never ahead of you, never behind you. Talia looked from his hand to the calm water below, where the reflection of the rising sun shimmered above the peaceful city her mother had died to protect. At last she understood Helena's final lesson. Real strength had never meant standing alone. It meant choosing the people who stood beside you when the world insisted you should sink. She placed her hand in Caspian's, their fingers fitting together with quiet certainty rather than destiny alone. At that very moment, the ancient bells of Asterfall rang once beneath the crystal blue lake, clear enough for every wolf on the shore to hear. One by one, the members of Tidefen lowered their heads, not to a king's command, but to a woman they had once called broken and now knew had carried the courage to save them all. As the morning sun climbed higher, its light reached through the clear water and illuminated the towers beneath the lake until they seemed to rise toward the sky. The tide had never abandoned Talia. It had simply carried her, one impossible wave at a time, to the place where truth, love, and courage would finally rise together.